I don't love it. I actually hate it. I never want to read anything from this author again. This was a 10 out of 10 no notes book for me, okay? This book feels like a fairy tale. It feels like you've stepped into a fairy tale and you're living it out through our FMC's eyes. I have a love-hate relationship with dark romance. Because if someone has the money and they want to do something nice for you, why stop them? Welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name's Alex and today we're filming my July reading wrap up. Now I'm so excited. This is my third month in a row filming this video. I just get so excited to talk to you guys about the books I read in July, and July was a really good reading month for me, not just because I read a lot of good books, but also because I started dabbling into audiobooks. I found some books that really worked for me in audio. So I ended up reading 14 books in July, which I'm so excited to talk to you guys about. I have my laptop here and I ended up writing notes as I was reading all of these books because there's a lot of things I think about as I'm reading these books that then when it comes to doing the reading wrap up, I end up forgetting and completely missing out and leaving out of the video. So this time around, every time I would finish a book, I would open my notes app on my laptop and write some stuff down that I want to tell you guys in this video. Like usual, I'm going to be telling you guys a little bit about the book, about the plot, just so you guys have an idea in case you're interested in reading this book. Also, I'm going to be going through all the tropes that I can remember for each book because sometimes there's certain tropes that just put me off a story and I'd rather not waste my time. Finally, I'm going to share with you guys some things I did like about the books and some things I didn't like about the book because I'm at that stage in my reading journey where regardless what book I read, even if I give it 5 stars, I still have things I didn't like about it because no story is perfect and that's okay. Cool, so let's get straight into this video and talk about the books I read in July. Okay, so the first book I read in July is Summer in the City by Alex Astor. This is my first Alex Astor contemporary romance. I actually don't know if she has any other contemporary romances out there, so if she does, then maybe I'll give other ones a try. But this one for me was a bit disappointing. Let me open my Goodreads. The plot of this book focuses around our FMCL and our MMC Parker. Now, Parker's a tech billionaire. He just sold his startup and he made like a lot of money. And our FMC is moving to New York City for a summer to help her get out of her writer's block. She's like a movie writer. She ends up realizing that her next door neighbor is Parker, who she had a hookup with in a club like 2 years before. She has been despising Parker for the past 2 years because when they met in the club 2 years prior, he assumed she was a gold digger because those were the kind of women that I guess were approaching him now that the news came out that he has a lot of money and his business is really successful. And our FMCL basically carries this assumption that this man made about her for the next 2 years as motivation for her career. So when I say the FMC has some money trauma, I am not kidding. Now they end up doing a bit of a fake dating situation. This book, the first 50% of this book was amazing, okay? I thought it was gonna be a 5-star read, 4-star read, 5-star read. I was so impressed by it. I was into the New York City summer vibes. Like I was so ready for this book to blow my mind. And then when I tell you, it hit the 50% mark and this book took such a turn that I was like, I don't know what's happening. I don't know what's happening. This book does have a third act breakup, which I can say that's where stuff goes downhill. The most frustrating thing about this book is how Elle has so much money trauma and then she proceeds to throw it into Parker's face. Every time he tries to spend money for her to do something nice for her, she ends up like getting upset by it and throwing it back in his face. Now, he is also a bit superficial. He doesn't seem to understand that she doesn't like him spending money on her. So he'll spend a lot of money on doing something nice for her and then she will get upset and then 2 months later he'll do the exact same thing again. And I'm like, what happened to DIYs? What happened to arts and crafts? Okay. To be honest, I thought he was really sweet the way he would spend money on her. It felt very intentional and it gets so frustrating to read about because if someone has the money and they want to do something nice for you, why stop them? Why get in their way? After the third act conflict, this book for me turned into a 2 to 3 star read, and I think I gave it 3 stars because I was feeling generous at the time. So I gave it 3 stars because it was an okay story, but I was left thinking that this couple should not be together. The way Elle treats poor Parker by the end of the book, you are genuinely so heartbroken for him. and I do not think that they could be together. I don't think this is going to be a successful relationship in the long term, and I think we don't have a long epilogue or like 10 years later epilogue, because I don't think this couple is going to be together in 10 years. So that's why I think for me this was like a bit of a frustrating read, even though it's really short. It was only 300 pages. And for some reason, it felt really long and very repetitive because of the conflict. But I did love the New York City summer vibe. I think they go on a lot of like really cute dates. And I do think Parker is like really thoughtful. And he's not the kind of person that would just throw money at something. I feel like he's using his money in like a thoughtful way. Next book I read was Blood and Roses by Callie Hart. I saw that this was a 2026 release, and I absolutely love Quicksilver and Brimstone. Oh my god, Brimstone. I absolutely love them. I'm looking to buy some special editions of the books, but I'm saving my money for when I find an edition that I'm totally obsessed with. So I was like, let me give this dark romance of hers a try, and I ended up listening to it in audio on Spotify Premium. Would I have still read this book if I didn't have it on audio? Probably not. I would have probably DNF'd. But something about me, I have a love-hate relationship with dark romance. Some dark romance really hits for me and I ended up loving it. And other dark romances I absolutely hate and I DNF, and I don't understand how anyone can love it. And I think it's because of the trigger warnings. There's certain dark romance themes that just don't work for me. If they're going to be in the story, I'm not going to be able to read about it. Now, this book was okay. I was able to finish it. So the plot of this story is that we have our FMC, and her name's Sloane. She is a ER trauma doctor, and her sister was kidnapped 2 years before. Now she's been trying to look for her sister, but she thinks her sister is like in the, criminal world. She thinks her sister maybe was like human trafficked or something along those lines. So she's working with a lot of like really sketchy people to try and find her sister. The book starts with our FMC Sloane going to a brothel to basically sleep with a stranger because the detective she's working with told her he's not going to give her any information unless she sleeps with this man. Now, the room is really dark, and our FMC is also a virgin. So this is like already an insane premise from chapter 1. She ends up following through, sleeping with this man, and then she doesn't hear from the detective that has been helping her find her sister. And after 3 days of quiet, silence, crickets, she goes to his office and finds the detective dead in his office. He has been dead for the past 3 days. She starts looking through the detective's office to try and figure out if there's a file on her sister, of any like details she might not be aware of, and she does find a file with her sister's name on it, but it's empty. So it seems like whoever came in and killed the detective also took her sister's files. Narration was done really well. The guy who narrates our MMC has such a deep voice. I don't think I've ever heard a man with such a deep voice before, but he's playing the part, okay? He's doing his job really, really well. Now, this book is very spicy. When I tell you very, very spicy, it felt like a lot of the emotional connection between our two main characters was around their like sexual activities. I don't know why I'm turning weird, like I can't talk about anything sex related when I film these videos, but I swear I'm a normal person. It felt to me like there was no real deep connection between them. They basically just start sleeping together and that becomes the main part of the story. Now there's a lot of triggering topics in this book. When I tell you I did a reading vlog and I started reading off all the things that are happening in this book. So we have like prostitution, we have orgies, we have murder, we have like rape, we have kidnapping. Honestly, everything you can think about is in this book. And I think for me, it desensitized me to the overall story because the more crazy things happened, the more I was like, I don't care anymore. Okay, I don't care. And the book does end up on a cliffhanger. So if that is something you're interested in, then maybe this book is for you. I hope I'm doing a good job at describing what is going on in this book so that in case you guys are interested in it, you can decide if it's for you. I rated this book 2 stars. I'm so sorry, Miss Callie Hart. Okay, I'll be reading the next book in the Quicksilver series. I love that series so much. Okay, the next book I read, I was clearly in a mood because the next book I read is Savage Blooms, which I can also say this is a very, very, very spicy book. It's a bit of a dark gothic romance bordering on erotica. It features a relationship between 4 people. Okay, so this book takes place in the Scottish countryside, and we have Adam and Nicola. Now they are best friends from uni, and they're from the US, and they travel to Scotland because Adam's grandfather passed away, and because he passed away, this encouraged Adam, I'm assuming as part of his like grief journey, to go to Scotland and visit this estate that his grandfather has been talking to him about his whole life. His grandfather used to tell Adam all of these like good night sleep stories, and they would all be taking place at this like magical, mysterious place in Scotland, this estate. When they do find the property, there's two people living there. We have Eileen and Finley. Now Eileen is the owner of the house, and she is the last surviving member of her line, and Finley is like the groundskeeper, lives on the property with her and like helps her out to maintain it. But they are acting really weird, so it's really hard to tell if Eileen and Finley are together or if they're not together, or what their relationship is. Now Adam and Nicola end up staying there for like 2 weeks, I believe, and the entire time there's just like weird things happening. The book kind of takes off from there, but what does happen is all of our 4 main characters, they all feel attracted to each other in a certain way. So this ends up being a bit of like a love square. I don't think I've ever read one of these like books before. The idea is that they are all kind of attracted to each other, and they all spend time throughout the book getting to know each other in different pairings, if that makes sense, but also like all as a group. I think that's the most like surprising thing for Adam and Nicola. When they get there, they find this like attraction to these two Scottish strangers. Also, I did listen to parts of the audiobook for this, and I thought it was really good. Like the main characters have like a Scottish accent, which I think is like a really nice touch to the story. It really paints the picture. So I would say, even though it's labeled as a fantasy, I would probably say it reads more like a contemporary romance with a potential like magical element that I think will be evolved more into book number 2, which by the way is coming out in 2027, and I will be reading it. I rated this book 5 stars because I thought it was really cool and like unique and like weird, but also like it just works for me. Now the next book I read was The Exquisite Torment of Loving Your Enemy by Bridget Knightley. I read this in a reading vlog as well, so if you want more of my thoughts on this book, then please do check out that video. This was a 10 out of 10 no notes book for me, okay? This is a duology or a duet, I never know which one's which. This is just a 2-book series, so this was the continuation and the ending to this series. Now if this would have been a 10-book series, I would have read every single one. Book number 1 was not spicy, and I described it as a romantasy that reads more like a contemporary romance, in the sense that the magical aspect is a bit low-key. It's not a lot of world building. It focuses more on the relationship of the characters rather than the fantasy and the plot on the background. Now book 2 focuses exactly on what the title says, The Exquisite Torment of Loving Your Enemy. There's definitely a lot of torment that our characters are going through, but it ends up being like a beautiful happy ending. This book is also very relationally focused, so again, if you're looking for a romantasy with like a lot of plot, a lot of like cliffhangers, a lot of big reveals, this is not the book for you. This reads more like a really sweet contemporary romance. There was a big reveal around like who the villain / bad guy is, but for me it really didn't do much. I feel like the side characters were not really properly fleshed out, that when you do learn who the villain is, you're kind of a bit like, okay, I mean the story's great. I wasn't banking everything on this big reveal, if that makes sense. I'm going to order the Fairly version because I have the Fairly version of book 1, and I'm going to order the Fairly version of book 2, and then I'm going to display it on my bookshelves because this might be one of my favorite romantasy series of all time. It's got that British banter, it takes place in a magical version of London, you've got like true enemies to lovers. Book number 2 also has spice for those of you guys who are interested, but do check out my video where I read this book with you guys because I had so much fun filming that. So okay, next book I read was Variation by Rebecca Yarros. I did a reading vlog where I read 3 Rebecca Yarros contemporary romances. I've always wanted to read more of her contemporary romances. I've only read Fourth Wing from her. I really obviously like Fourth Wing so much, so I was like, I'll give some other of her books a try. Now her other books are all military romances, and I think I am not sure that military romances are for me. I think they're a bit like dark romances. They can either be a hit or a miss for me, and sometimes there's just like the military is too at the forefront of the story, and I think that takes away from it sometimes for me personally, and sometimes the military is in the background. It's just a detail in the background, and I think that works better for me. So the first book I started with was A Variation. Now this is a sports romance / military romance. So Variation features our FMC Ali, and she is a a professional ballerina. She comes from a really rich family where everyone is a ballerina. Her sister is a ballerina. She has 3 sisters, and one of them has passed away in a tragic car accident. We learned this at the beginning of the book. Ali and her family grew up holidaying, taking vacations in this small town. It's giving every summer after, that's kind of like the vibe. And she ends up having a childhood best friend called Hudson. Now Hudson has always wanted to be part of the Coast Guard, I believe, which I didn't realize is part of the military. Something happens between them, and then they don't end up speaking for 10 years. So when the book starts, we're in the present, and Ali and Hudson are reconnecting after not speaking for 10 years. Now she's going through a lot with her career as a ballerina. She ends up getting injured, which is what brings her back to the vacation town. Now Hudson has always been in love with Ali, and I think what we get from the beginning of the story is that they haven't been speaking because he did something that led to them not speaking anymore. So we know it's implying he's at fault, but we don't know exactly what happened. Now there's also another plot in the story which I can't tell you about because it will spoil the story for you, but there's something else going on between these two that connects them and pushes them together all the time, that also involves their individual families. So it ends up being like quite a lot of mystery, but it does have a somewhat of a big reveal at the end, and you end up being like quite shocked about what's happening. Also, the amount of times that our FMC Ali falls in water so that Hudson ends up running in after her and saving her is unbelievable, okay? It's unbelievable. It shouldn't be this many times in a book. Similarly, I think all of Rebecca's books have a bit of like a reveal at the end of the book. You think something's going on, you think things are going a certain way, and then at the end, you're kind of like told, no, just kidding, is nothing like you thought it was gonna be. So this book is dual POV from the perspective of Ali and Hudson. We also have childhood friends to lovers. We also have second chance romance, and then we also have sports romance / military romance. But I would say the military takes a bit of a back step in this romance, and I would say the sports element is a bit more at the forefront. So it's more of a sports romance than a military romance, but both elements are in the story, which is quite interesting. I don't think I've ever read such a unique combination before. Now the next book I read was Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. So this is my first YA fantasy romance since I started my reading journey last summer. Now, I don't tend to read YAs just because the main characters tend to be so much younger, and me at 27, I want to read about people who are my age or older. I don't really want to read about teenagers, and I think in a lot of ways, this book reminded me why I don't tend to read a lot of YAs. The plot of this book I thought was really, really interesting. So when the book starts, we have Evangeline, who's our main character, and she is running into this church looking for the Prince of Hearts. Now, the Prince of Hearts is a fate, which is described in this book as an immortal, and he can like grant wishes to people, but then it can also come back and bite you in the ass because you usually have to exchange something in return for these wishes. Now, Evangeline is looking for a wish because the love of her life, Luke, is due to marry someone else. Supposedly, Evangeline and Luke were childhood best friends, and they've developed this romance that we hear about like off page, and now he is marrying someone else, which is, I think, Evangeline's stepsister. Also, Evangeline has an evil stepmother, which is definitely giving Cinderella, okay? She ends up meeting the Prince of Hearts, and he says, I'm gonna stop Luke's wedding if you agree to give me 3 kisses at a time of my choosing. So Evangeline has to kiss 3 people of his choosing at his chosen time, if that makes sense. Now, the Prince of Heart apparently is cursed in the sense that he cannot kiss anyone unless he wants them to die, because his kiss is fatal unless he's kissing the love of his life or his one true love. Evangeline ends up agreeing to this deal because she's desperate, and she realizes when she goes to Luke's wedding that everyone has been turned into stone. There's also a gossip sheet in this story, which plays a really big part. So there's a reporter of sorts in this community that ends up interviewing people and sharing the gossip. It's definitely giving Bridgerton at times. And this reporter apparently is at this wedding and realizes that everyone has been turned into stone, so he ends up writing about this, and Evangeline becomes a bit of like a celebrity in her town slash community, and she gets invited to the castle where she ends up getting sent to the north. Now the magical north, I can't remember exactly how it's described in this book. It's basically a different part of the continent where everything is supposed to be like magical. So she ends up taking her stepsister with her, and they both end up traveling to the north where the majority of the story takes place. For me personally, this was not my favorite read of all time. I ended up actually reading all 3 books in the series, but I'm not gonna talk about the next 2 because I didn't love them at all. I gave this book 3 stars because I found the FMC super naive. The writing is really good in the sense that you don't know which characters are good or bad, or which ones are like good intentions towards Evangeline or bad intentions towards Evangeline. So it feels like we as the reader are almost as much in the dark as Evangeline herself. So it definitely feels like we're in her head and experiencing the world through her eyes. Also, I think the author does a really good job at like painting the picture. This book definitely feels like a fairy tale come to life. Like I said, it has those Cinderella elements, and also it has like a bit of Snow White elements in the sense that our MMC, which is the Prince of Hearts, he ends up carrying an apple. He's constantly eating apples or throwing apples in the air or holding apples, a variety of different colors, which I didn't really understand why these apples were such a big point in the story. This book feels like a fairy tale. It feels like you've stepped into a fairy tale and you're living it out through our FMC's eyes. Also, something I didn't necessarily love about this book is that our FMC Evangeline, she is obsessed with having her happily ever after, and at some point it feels like this was more important to her than actually finding the right person, because as soon as a man would come in the story that could potentially be the love of her life, she would become like so obsessed with that vision and that ideal that it would like cloud her judgment in terms of like, is this person like genuinely a good match for you? I didn't really like our MMC, the Prince of Hearts. I did find him really annoying and really rude. I just think there's a bit of a balance to be struck in terms of like how mean they are or how long they're mean for. To me, it felt like this first entire book, he was just so horrible to her. Book 1 does end on a cliffhanger, which is, I guess, engaging enough for me to read book number 2. I know this was a very, very popular series. That's why I ended up buying it and giving it a go. But personally, I think it just wasn't for me. I don't think the story's bad. I think book 2 and 3 definitely get worse, personally. But I think it's just one of those things where I didn't really relate to the FMC. I didn't think her and the Prince of Hearts had like a connection, a very strong connection. I didn't really think they were like very well suited for each other. I think if I would have read this book when I was 15, 16, I would have eaten it up. Okay, next book I read was Your Knife, My Heart by K.M. Moronova. I hope I'm saying that right. This was my first book by this author, and honestly, it was a 5-star read for me, okay? This is another dark romance because the amount of craziness that happens in this book, I was blown away. We meet Emery, and she has been imprisoned because we learn that she's part of a really big mafia slash crime family, and she has been acting as their family's executioner her whole life. She basically has been trained to be a killer, and eventually she ends up being caught by the police. So this book takes place in like a completely normal world, okay? We have the police, the justice system, we have the military, the way we have it in the real world. So she ends up being like imprisoned because her father ends up snitching on her, and she knows she has this really long sentence ahead of her. But what happens when she gets to the prison is she ends up being kidnapped, and what this group tells her is that the outside world thinks you've died, but actually you're not dead. You're being taken to this other section of the real military called the Dark Forces. Now the Dark Forces, like I said, is a sub-branch of the real military, but it's made out of criminals, really like bad criminals, put together in like task forces, and their job is basically to go on these like really high risk missions. It feels a bit like the Navy SEALs, like, you know, the real life Navy SEALs. It feels a bit like that, but if these people were criminals and unhinged. She is put into a cell with a guy called Cameron. Like, Cameron has like white hair. They're really painting a good picture of the fact that this man is really attractive. And he is being imprisoned for 24 hours with our FMC Emery because Cameron has been part of the Dark Forces for like 7 years maybe, and he has been taking some drugs, experimental drugs that this dark forces is producing, and he is literally insane. This man is crazy, and what he's been doing is he's been killing his partners whenever they go on special missions. And he's been killing so many of his partners that he's gotten in trouble basically. And he's been imprisoned, and now him and Emery are chucked into the cell together to see if he will kill her in 24 hours. And if he's not going to kill her in 24 hours, then they can both become partners, and Emery can go to the trials and the training to become part of the dark forces, if that makes sense. This book is so gory and so dark. There's a lot of fighting scenes. There's a lot of people dying. There's a lot of elements of like trials and like Hunger Games vibes. It's also very fast paced as a book, and it's very short compared to like how much groundwork and how much action goes in here. It's also very spicy, I would say, and the spice scenes are like quite dark, and it definitely has elements of like I will fix him. Like Emery definitely comes into this dark forces military with the mindset that she will fix Cameron, which I kind of loved. But also the book ends on like an insane cliffhanger. Okay, I was so glad that book 2 is already out, because I was like, if I would have read this and book 2 was not out, I would have like lost my mind. So I give this book 5 stars. I was obsessed with it, and this is what I mean when I say I have a love-hate relationship with dark romances, because I will read a dark romance and I'll be like, this is the most messed up thing ever, but like 5 stars, I'm obsessed with it. I'll be recommending it to everyone. And then I'll read another dark romance that's really popular, like God of Malice, for example, and I'll be like, I don't love it. I actually hate it. I never want to read anything from this author again. Take my recommendations for dark romances with a grain of salt, and do please always make sure you're reading the trigger warnings, because some triggers for me are like a deal breaker and some of them are like whatever. But this book, I thought it was really, really well written, and I'm definitely going to read more by the author. So the next book I picked up was the sequel, which is Your Blade, My Back, and I also gave this book 5 stars. I thought it was an amazing conclusion to this 2-book series. I feel like I can't say really much a lot about this because I don't want to spoil book number 1 for you guys, but I loved it. I thought the romance was amazing. Again, this book is very violent and very gory at times. There's a lot of descriptions of really gory things that if you're not into it, maybe this is not the book for you. I feel like I could stomach it because it was so short, and if it doesn't feel like it's dragged out in these gory moments. Also, I think the book is very action-packed, as in my head it was unfolding like a real action movie because there's so much going on. Like I said, this is giving Navy SEALs but evil. Cool. And then I went back for my next book and I read The Last Letter by Rebecca Yarros. I read this for a reading vlog, so I'm not going to go into a lot of details because I already shared my thoughts in that video. But this is probably the saddest book I've ever read. I'm a romantasy reader that leans towards really lighthearted, really hee ha ha ha. I want to be like screaming, crying, and like kicking my feet. I do not want to be depressed when I read books. I don't want to read about it really traumatizing things, because for me reading is like an escape from the real world. So I want to read about funny, happy things, and this book is none of that. There's so much going on that our characters go through. This is again a military romance. Our main characters are both dealing with grief in their own way. So the premise of the story is we have Elle, and she is a single mother of 2, and she's also a business owner. She's running a B&B. Beckett is from a foster care background, so outside of the military he really doesn't have anyone that he's really close with. He doesn't have any close friends or any family, and because of that, Ryan suggests that Beckett and his sister Ella start writing letters to each other and become pen pals. Now Beckett and Ella have never met in the real world, but they just like find a lot of refuge in these letters that they're sending to each other. What we learn is that Ryan, Elle's brother, ends up passing away in like a military incident, and as part of his last wish, Ryan sends Beckett a letter asking him if he can go to his sister Ella and take care of her, because she is going through a lot emotionally and personally and needs someone to be there for her. And something that happens at the beginning of the story is one of her children ends up developing this mysterious illness that we don't know what it is and we don't know how it's going to unfold. Hopefully from that summary you can understand there is a lot going on in this book, and it does end up having a bit of like a less traditional happy ending, in the sense that on the romance front it is a happy ending. In other aspects of the book it ends up not being a happy ending. I rated this book 3 stars because, like I said, I don't tend to love really sad stories, but I thought this was a well-written book, and if you're one of those people who craves really emotional books that will make you feel so many feelings and will make you cry, then this is definitely a good read for you. But for me, I probably won't be recommending this to any of my close friends. Cool, we have 2 more books to talk about that I read in July. So next book I read was Wolf by Paisley Hope. Now I read in June a book by Paisley Hope that I ended up DNFing, and it wasn't really my favorite of all time, but I think that was because it had a trope that I'm not usually obsessed with. But Wolf is a bit of like a dark romance, I can say. I definitely say it's a dark romance on the lighter side of things, so if you don't tend to love dark romance, I think you should give this a try because it's a bit lighter. It's not as dark as the other ones. Also a motorcycle gang club romance. I feel like motorcycle gangs and motorcycle clubs are such an American thing. Please do correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we have any like proper motorcycle gangs in Europe. And I think if you tell me you have a motorcycle, I think you have a Vespa. I'll attach a picture here. This is where my mind goes when someone says they have a motorcycle. But in this story, people have proper Harley Davidson motorcycles, and they ride them with like all the gear and everything. So Brinley lives in a big city, and I think she's a creative / interior designer, and she lives with her boyfriend of like a few years who is really polished and comes from like a really wealthy family. And what happens at the beginning of this book is Brinley ends up getting fired from her job, and also she thinks her boyfriend is going to propose when they go to this like special dinner, but he ends up letting her know that he got a job opportunity and he's gonna be moving away, so he wants them to go long distance. Now this makes Brinley realize that this is not a relationship for her. Things are not going the way she's expected. So what ends up happening is she breaks off her relationship. Because Brinley now doesn't have a job anymore or a boyfriend, she moves out of their shared apartment and moves back to her hometown in her parents' home. Now her parents have both passed away, so the home is basically empty and has not been used in a while. But when she returns to her small town where she grew up, she runs into one of her childhood best friends called Layla. Now Layla's getting married to a man who's in a motorcycle gang called Hounds of Hell. Now apparently this gang has always been around this town / city. I hope I'm saying motorcycle gang and it's not motorcycle club. Is there a difference between a gang and a club? Brinley is invited to all of the wedding celebrations because she's back in town, and also she's available because she's unemployed. But what ends up happening is Brinley ends up meeting Gabriel Wolf, who's the president of this motorcycle club, and they have like an instant connection, instantly obsessed with each other. And that's where the story takes off. Now, this motorcycle club is also in rivalry with another motorcycle club, which ends up being a big part of the story. But I would say the story is most like relationship focused, as in the relationship between the characters are at the forefront of the story, especially between Brinley and Gabriel. This is a very spicy book, and I would say some of the spice scenes have a very unique take. Some involve a knife. If you pick up what I'm putting down, there's also some darker themes to the story, like murder and kidnapping and torture that are involved. And also I can't comment on like the accuracy of the culture. Please do let me know if this is what motorcycle clubs are like in the US, because I have genuinely no experience with this. So I was like, everything I was reading, I was like, okay, I guess this is what it's like in the real world. It felt like the motorcycle club is like somewhere between like legal and illegal, and they seem to be predominant in a town, so everyone knows who they are, but they don't end up being in trouble with the police in any way or like the justice system. Also, our FMC seen as like the good girl. I think the whole point of the idea is that she's attracted to Gabriel because he brings out this like darker side of her that she's been kept hidden / suppressed by her own family, who her parents growing up used to be like churchgoers and very, very religious. And they instilled in her a lot of manners and etiquette and how you should be doing things rather than how like you want to do things and what works best for you. So she feels like she's been suppressed her whole life, including in her previous relationship with her ex that she broke up with. So when she meets Gabriel, he brings out this darker side of her, and she ends up realizing that she really likes this life and blends in really well. So that's like a big point of the story. Also, this book is definitely a bit of like the insta-lust, insta-love side of things. Like Gabriel and Brinley see each other in passing in front of a coffee shop in this small town, and they end up being both like obsessed with each other. from then onwards, even though they don't even speak, they just like make eye contact for a few seconds and the story kind of takes off from there. If that's something you're interested in, I know this is like a very popular release. I rated it 5 stars. I loved everything about it, and I will be reading the other books in the series. So the final book I read in July was The Losers Part 1 by Harley LaRue. I read Her Soul to Take, and I loved that book so much. I was obsessed with it. It's a demon romance, and I rated it 5 stars. So I was very excited to give The Losers Part 1 a try. Now this book is an MMMF, Why Choose Romance, which I only read one of these other books before, and that was Pucking Around. I still think about it like every day because it was so crazy. Like so spicy beyond like anything I would have ever imagined. Oh wait, I think I said at the beginning that this is a Why Choose MMMF romance, but it's a Why Choose MMMF romance. So there's 5 people in this relationship. Okay, I think it was too spicy for my liking, but that's usually the case when you have a Why Choose with so many people involved. Now what happens in this book is we have Jessica, and she is from this small town. She used to be the popular hot girl in school. She used to date like the football player or one of them, and she has since moved away, and now she has come back to her small town to live with her parents because she got fired or because she's working a internship that doesn't pay a lot, one of them. And she ends up running into a group of 4 guys. They used to be the losers in high school. Now these were the people that everyone was picking on. They came from broken homes. They used to always get bullied, and that also got expelled from school. Now these 4 men all live together in a house, and they run like a garage that helps like restore cars, and they are all involved with each other in like pairs. All of these men have had some level of a crush on Jessica when they were in high school. Even though she was the popular girl, they used to bully them. So there is a bit of like a bully romance of sorts, which again is not my favorite thing. I think if someone bullied me, the last thing I would want is to be attracted to them or to date them. But I can understand this is like quite a popular trope for some people. This book is definitely giving to me high school behavior, even though all our characters are 25. Like there's a bit of a rivalry going on in the background between Jessica and these 4 men, and also this other group of people that went to the same high school as them. And it does feel a bit childish at times, because I'm like, these people are 25. Why are we acting like this is still a high school rivalry? Do I think 5 people in a relationship is too many? Yes. Purely because I think it's really hard to flesh out a story when there's so many relationships, and each of these 5 people need to have individual connections with each other and also connection as a group, which I think is really hard to deliver in a story. I felt, for example, like Manson and Lucas, which are 2 men in the story, I thought their characters were really fleshed out. I thought their relationship was really fleshed out. Whereas Vincent and Jason, which are also 2 other men in the story, I felt like they were just like background filler characters. Like I would read their names and I would be like, I don't know anything about these men. I feel like they don't have any unique characteristics. They're not very well fleshed out, and I'm struggling to keep up with these many love interests. Like I'm struggling to keep up with like, how is Jess's connection with Vincent different than Jess's connection with Lucas, for example, and Jess's connection with Jason? At some point, I feel like it was just too much. Also, this book is a 5 people POV, which again, I think for me is just a bit too much. It's a bit too confusing at times. It makes it really hard to keep track of like whose POV I'm in at one time. I will probably not be reading book number 2 in this duet because, like I said, it's just a bit too spicy for me, and I don't want to read like another 100 pages of just like pure smut if I'm not invested in the like overall plot of the story. So I think those are all the 14 books I read in the month of July. If you're gonna read any of these books, or if you've read any of these books, please do let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you in my next video.